Hey, welcome to another episode of Legion Elite Motorsports. In this episode, we're going to do some tech tips, mainly about the head. I have a theory, haven't tested it out or anything, but just an idea. And I'm going to have you guys let me know what you think in the comments, of course. And then we're going to have some oil pump talk, which is very important. So, yep, let's dive in. Okay, thank you for joining me on this episode of Tech Talk. Basically, we're going to talk about a couple things and hopefully gain some knowledge together. As we know, knowledge is power. So I want you guys to take a ride with me on this little journey and see if we can somewhat kind of reinvent the wheel, so to speak. So first things first, you have to know what you're dealing with. And that's what we're gonna learn first. This one is gonna be somewhat of a little experiment for a racing engine I'm gonna be putting together a little bit in the future. So this here whole thing, including valve cover, is a M9 head, as you can see there. So basically what I wanted to do is first understand what we have here, which I did in a longer episode, actually a later episode, and everything. And we're just going to kind of reiterate a couple things just for the new viewers. You may be new to the Starion world and might want a little insight on a couple things. So this head is an M9, which is a 1994 head. This one specifically is from 1994. It varies from 92 to 94, more or less, but this one's a 1994. Okay. It comes with this valve cover that has a plaque, has a platform and everything specifically for the plaque that says Mitsubishi on it. You can see some subtle differences. Instead of it coming straight out here, it goes to the side, which is not a big deal. Everything else there is the same. So let's look under it, okay? So there's a lot of differences here. Because it's a newer design head, technically, they wanted to make sure they kind of revamped for better airflow, and this head does flow a little bit better than the original from the 80s, M8, as an example. So basically what we're looking at is it has roller rockers, right? Intake and exhaust roller rockers, and it has a lifter setup, has a lifter bucket, self-adjusting lifters. They operate through oil pressure, stuff like that. But another item, let me see if I can get this loose so we can take a look at these. Okay. Alrighty. Is the cam. The cam lobes are actually thinner than normal, but they have a really high peak. I need to measure one of these one day, but yeah, in general, a very nice high peak, which is good. And as you can see, it has good longevity, so it stays up for a long duration of time, as opposed to the stock one is a little bit more straight to the point. So that aside, and this cam does go all the way out the back. It says M9 there. Okay. So we're gonna put this back. And now we're gonna look at the combustion chamber. Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's see what all the hubbub is about. So as you can see, it has a heart-shaped combustion chamber, right? Kidney shape, heart shape, however you see it. And along with this head, they changed the flow design to swirl it. That's what this heart shape is all about. So as the air comes in, comes off of here, comes into a swirl, and they actually used a smaller, what do you call this, a combustion chamber. So if you look at the head gasket, you'll really see how small it is. So it's right about there. So they shrunk a lot of it to raise the compression ratio, a couple scratches, but to raise the compression ratio for a non-turbo application. So not only did they raise the compression ratio from what was 9.8 to 1. If I have a picture, I'll put it up right over here. I think I might. But yeah, I'll pop it up over here so you can see it. And then we'll continue from there. So in between the valves is a weak point, okay, on the regular head, where right in between the valve, it actually cracks. You know, once you reach a certain plateau of power, it actually cracks. So this one is actually thicker in that whole midsection. Let me see if you can get a better look, because it has this rib that continues through the middle. So it's actually thicker in the middle where you need it. So this one would technically be less prone to cracking other than the standard one, which, you know, would crack fairly easy depending on how it's put together. So I wanted to kind of reinvent the wheel on this particular point specifically. So not on this head, but more so on the stock head. So I was thinking, because this head is cast, and again, let me know what you guys think. On the M8, the ones that's more common, I think this area is slightly thinner and the valve seating position is slightly different. But anyway, I was thinking if this could be drilled out, probably from here to here, drilled out, and then probably like a billet aluminum piece inserted and then machined to, you know, kind of fit perfectly in here. And the reason I say that is because on the 3000 GT VR4, they have an issue where, you know, four valves per cylinder, and the sealing ring actually sits between a coolant passage left and right. So the ring actually goes on that little sliver of aluminum, which is also cast. And what they do is they drill that piece out and they put a billet, well, usually they use like a steel rod and you know, machine it flat so it switches, you know, material. But I'm pretty sure you could use a billet piece of aluminum and weld it and then cut it, and then it'll be stronger. So instead of being thick like this one, you could see like a loop from and to on each side, and that basically flexes at high horsepower and acts like a blown head gasket or a lifted head syndrome. So I'm basically getting that from that and putting that to here, to where we could possibly do the same thing to strengthen that area on the head. So that's pretty much where I wanted to touch base on that. So moving on, I also wanted to talk about oil pressure. So pertaining to oil pressure, I wanted to kind of touch bases on that. I personally think that because there's actually a couple, but one of the main failures to the G54B engine is oil pressure. It's pretty low compared to what it should be, I guess. So this is an original turbo oil pump, and then this one is a non-turbo oil pump, but this one is slightly different and very much better. I'm gonna explain that in a minute. So this oil pump is normally ranges oil pressure from about 15 psi at idle all the way up to about like 70, 72, and of course that varies depending on the type of oil you're running. The thicker the oil, the higher the psi. The thinner the oil, the lower the psi. So one of the things I notice is that the car actually operates better if you can get the oil pressure at idle to be around 22 to 26 psi, and then full tilt to 100, 105 psi. So basically this one would do that, but then you run into a problem depending on if you're doing a racing build or whatnot. You could break something internally. This is aluminum. This one is an iron. It's a stronger mix. This one is actually way heavier than this one, and I kind of wanted to point that out because on the turbo setup, the pickup is right here. On the non-turbo setup, the pickup is on the block. So let me show you the differences so you can kind of get an idea of how that works. And then we're going to also show how to shim the oil pump to raise the oil pressure and how that whole system works. So as you know, for this one, you put the tube on here, and there's 2 bolts that's on the main bolts to tighten down the pickup tube. That's a problem if you're running ARP main bolts because there's no place to bolt the pickup tube. This option is way better because it doesn't utilize the main bolts to bolt down the pickup tube. It actually bolts to the block. So let me show you. Okay, so here is a block. This one is actually Mad Mike's block, you know, using it as an example in this video. But it's upside down, as you can see, because we can see the bottom. And here, you see this is the turbo oil pump gasket. The non-turbo oil pump gasket is way bigger. Let me actually show you that now. So, here, oh, probably got it the other way, there we go, is the non-turbo gasket, okay? So, let me show you why. So there's a certain couple of valleys that are not needed to be covered on another oil pump versus another. So the feed for the oil and the return for the oil. So let's talk about that. So the pickup for the turbo one, of course, comes from the pickup that bolts to these screws here. But the non-turbo actually gets it from the block right here. All Starion blocks have this, okay? There was a couple of front wheel drive variants that were non-turbo, same cast, different oil pump. So they have 2-in-1 type of thing going on here. So it bolts to this, actually have the pickup tube right here. And it bolts to here. And it ends up in the same position as the turbo one without bolting it down. So you can run ARPs all day, every day, no problem. And as you can see, put that down for a second, the valley for this oil pickup is right here. Goes all the way to the front, right there. So it doesn't need to pick up externally, it picks up internally. So on the turbo oil pump, this area is blocked off, okay? and then it feeds it into the block via this cavity and this cavity. So this feeds the mains, this goes up towards the head. So, boom. So now we're gonna move on to raising the oil pressure. Okay, so let's talk about the oil pump. So, how do you regulate oil pressure when you have these two gears that are making a large amount of oil pressure? How do you relieve it, basically? So the answer to that is it's built in. So when it reaches a certain PSI, a spring, just like a wastegate, just like a blow-off valve, just like all of that stuff there, it slides back and bleeds the oil pressure out from here and there. It's on the inside too. It's a little hard to see because it's dark. So let's get a closer look. Okay, so here's that. Here's a spring that regulates your oil pressure. And come on, let's see if I can get this thing out. Let me get a flathead. Okay, there we are. So here's the plunger. Okay, so from here, I guess we could use our imagination. So it's spring loaded. It's sitting in this position when it's not in use, but then when you turn on your car and it's icy cold and you're just warming up, it goes all the way up to near max, and then it regulates by opening the hole. Just slides back via spring right here, right? So this is the back bucket that actually holds the spring in place. Okay, and that's pretty simple. Bleeds off. Now, how do you get the oil pressure to rise? How? What do you do? How do you do it? Well, you mess with the spring pressure. So, if this is all the way in there, you see the spring pushes it all the way to the back, right? And then the cap goes on top like so. As you can see, it's no tension. You could put the piece in there by hand, right? No problem. What you want to do, and you'll hear this a lot, this actually applies for, I'd say, 78% of all vehicles have something like this, some way, shape, or form, unless it's electric or something like that. But, for all vehicles, you can shim the oil pump. If you ever hear that phrase, now you'll know exactly what they're talking about. Shim the oil pump. So how do you shim the oil pump? Well, you take some O-rings. It could be the little 10 millimeter washers that fit here. And you can actually fill this up, like maybe let's say three washers in there. That's actually too much. It's kind of recommended to use 2 to kind of get to around 88 to 95 psi, and then 3 will get you to 100 and change, depending on the size, of course. But anyway, so let's say you put some washers in there. Now, if you go to put this on here, you'll have to push it and then twist it. So that's the additional tension. So we're talking, from being able to put this on by hand to now you're actually having to force it on. You have to push it on. So I already have one done. And you could actually do the same thing for yours, depending on this one. So this one is going to be used for race applications because this one has a better chance of cracking because it's just regular aluminum. This one is a solid iron. It's very heavy. Part number is right here, M122. And if you ever get a hold of one of these, which is still cheaper than one of these, you'll see how heavy it is compared. Like this is aluminum, very light. This one is iron, very heavy. So anyway, the reason this is good is because when you reach around 100 PSI, this one will start to, you know, get a little fatigued, especially when you add heat into the equation. It'll kind of want to give, and at some point I'm sure it will. Best not to experience that. So on this one, you could see I used a screw. This pretty much equates to 3 washers. You know, if you could take 3 washers, put them side by side, put it up against this, it equates the same thing. But instead I used a screw because it also plays as a guide for the spring, so it doesn't bundle up, which I'm pretty sure it won't, just kind of a safety in my mind type of thing. So anyway, so as you see, this one has this as a shim for the spring, right? So now when I put it on, it won't reach. You see, you have to push it in to get it to thread. And that's kind of what you want on a performance application. I really wanted to go in depth with this one so you guys kind of know what to do and how to do it. But now you do. This is called shimming the pump. So yeah, knowledge is power, guys. You got to stay informed. Got to stay informed. And with that, we're going to call it an episode right there. I hope you found it very informative, helpful in some way, shape, or form. And if you're new here, definitely consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon for updated notifications. And yeah, definitely let me know what you think. I was thinking about that, you know, some time ago and wondering if that would be a good option to do pertaining to the head. And yep, if you're having any oil pressure issues or anything like that, definitely consider shimming it to raise that oil pressure up. But yeah, I will see you guys next episode. And remember, knowledge is power.